PBS's Frontline has produced a sweeping documentary. It tracks the formative years of both presidential candidates, current President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. Storytelling really gives a sense of why these politicians are the way they are. In one scene, they look at Joe Biden's first bid for the presidency and how he found his footing through somebody else's story. Take a listen.
I think that's always been one of his challenges. As he tries to go for president, he casts about for what he wants to say. He casts about for the issues he wants to put forward and what he wants to say he believes in, and it feels cast about.
Then one day, a video, a story that would give him something to say.
Why am I the first Kinnick in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
Obsessed with the tape, Biden studied it. He later wrote, "The ad was riveting. I couldn't take my eyes off Neil Kinnock."
Was it because they were weak? Those people who could work 8 hours underground and then come up and play football? Weak?
Biden could put himself into the Neil Kinnock story. Family in Scranton, Pennsylvania, family in the mines. And so, in a sense, he absorbed the Kinnock story and making it his own.
The campaign begins in earnest with the first votes for the next president in Iowa.
The candidate spent much of yesterday fanned out.
In Iowa, during the primary, he took Kinnock's words, made them his own.
Now, Mr. Biden.
Thank you very much. I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university?
He got up there and he gave the speech, and he got to the end, the last 3 minutes, and he gave Kinnock, but he did not attribute it to Kinnock.
Is it because they didn't work hard? My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania don't come up after 12 hours and play football for 4 hours?
And Joe Biden borrowed it and applied it to his own life and made a moving sort of aria, a moving sort of part of a speech about his own life, which in fact had been taken from Neil Kinnock.
I hope you'll consider me. Thank you very much.
So the documentary also addresses Trump's family dynamics, pointing to his father as a catalyst for the competitive nature. Let's take a listen to that.
I strongly suspect that he had a relationship with his father that accounts for a lot of what he became. And his father was a very brutal guy. He was a tough, hard driving guy who had very, very little emotional intelligence, to use today's terms.
Donald's father's overall message to his children was, and it was a very different message to the boys than to the girls. To the boys was compete, win, be a killer. Do what you have to win.
So joining us now is Michael Kirk. He's the filmmaker and the director of Frontline's The Choice 2020, Trump versus Biden. Michael, welcome to the show. It's great to see you.
It is great to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I've been a fan of Frontline for many, many years, so I had to have you here on the show. I've always watched whatever The Choice is. Tell us about what the process was in terms of making this film. Obviously, you made it similar, or there was a similar iteration of 2016. What did you feel had to be updated on Trump's side? What were some of the more formative experiences for Joe Biden?
There were, this is the fifth time I've made it. We've been doing it since 1988. It was very different this time because there are two men of a certain age who, who you think you sort of know everything about, but especially after 2016 and when we made the film about Trump. But we decided this time, because the country was in such crisis with the coronavirus and other things, to look at 8 experiences that they each had that are crisis-driven and how they, what they learned from the crisis, how they got into it, what it was, how they came out of it. And then we weave the two together. They're sort of 7-minute sequences. So you get a chance to measure the two men against each other. And you really find out much more than I knew even in 2016 about Trump, about the great family dysfunction, about the things he's learned and picked up along the way that you saw manifest on Tuesday night on that incredible performance on the debate. I saw somebody I recognized there, somebody I know a lot about his life, but I saw the next chapter. The ultimate manifestation of all the things we learned. So it was, and for anybody who wants to know the sort of origin story of a lot of what we saw on display there, This is that film. For Joe Biden, many, many more things, once you pull it all together, that are really fascinating, starting with that tremendous problem with stuttering, the effect of that on him as a 10-year-old, the humiliation he felt, the being bullied that he felt, and how that contributes to his both over-talkativeness, if that's a real word, and his desire to be in the middle all the time. And we also follow a lot of the tragedies, and you see where the grief counselor-in-chief comes from, that impulse in Biden.
On that clip that we played of Biden, such an interesting moment, and it was an issue that was sort of recurring for him. He had some other plagiarism issues, and even this time on the campaign trail, frankly, it didn't get all that much attention, but he started telling the story about getting arrested when he was going to see Nelson Mandela, and it turns out that didn't actually happen. What does this say about sort of his character, who he is, his political formation, and how he keeps ending up in these types of jams?
That's a really good question, and one we wrestled with. You know, I think Joe Biden doesn't carry a big ideology with him. He doesn't have a big program like Peggy Noonan said in that clip. He casts about for something, and I think he doesn't really believe that his own story is interesting, although if you watch the film, you realize how completely interesting it is and transformative it's been. But I think, he's a politician who's never had a national audience. The only election he's ever won was in South Carolina during this primary outside of Delaware. So he's a guy who I think continues to worry about exactly who he is. A lot of people who know him and love him and people who follow him say, I don't know why he worries about that, but he does. And it manifests itself sometimes in this overreach that is sometimes motivated by anger. He doesn't like people. He doesn't like that feeling that somebody's making fun of him or doesn't trust him. It was amazing to watch him try to hold on to himself while Trump was attacking him verbally Tuesday night. But that is, I think, that's my answer to your question, and I think it's going to have to be sufficient for us. Why does he do it? I don't think he really trusts who he is deep down inside. Is it important in terms of his persona and a man being president? Well, I think that's up to voters to decide.
Yeah, Michael, I'm actually curious on that. We talked about how he just doesn't really have an ideology. I mean, so how has his ideology shifted over the years? Who has found themselves to be influential in changing Biden's thinking on policy itself?
Well, I think it's not who. He's surrounded by, interestingly, the same people that he's been surrounded by for 50 years, including his sister, Val, who was his campaign manager forever. I think it's in a way, Joe Biden is riding the wave of the times all the time and gets himself in some real trouble. He has, by the way, been in enough trouble in life that he has perfected a kind of playbook response, which is fascinating because it's so different than Trump. When he does the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas problems, or when in the plagiarism scandal, he comes out and he admits the mistake. He apologizes, two things I've never seen Donald Trump do, and he works really hard to repair the situation. So I think in some ways, with the crime bill, with all the things that he's been involved in that people find so worrisome, and what the gaffe that he said about President Obama when they were campaigning against each other in Iowa, he occasionally, I mean, he always apologizes, he always admits the mistake, and he always goes to work on doing better every time. That's a very different response than Donald Trump brings to these situations.
Yeah. And Michael, on President Trump, I think it's fair to say I watched the film, takes a fairly dim view of him. There's some sort of like dark forces that you see as influencing the way that he grew into the person that we see before us now. I am also, not a person who particularly loves Donald Trump. And I feel like there are two frames, two lenses, competing lenses that people view him through who don't really like him. There's the sort of brash, over the top showman, anything for a rating, anything for applause, anything for adulation view. And then there's this sort of even darker view of this is someone who is deeply malevolent, who has like a grand scheme. This is the more like he's a fascist, has these Hitlerian or Mussolini type tendencies. From investigating his background, which lens do you think more accurately fits, or is there a different lens that more accurately fits who he actually is as a person?
I think if you watch the film as you've done, thank you, you get a real sense of it's not one thing or the other, but it is this composite that all really revolves around 3 or 4 important inputs into his life. His father is, as you showed, the power of winners and losers, the fact that his father really is still an audience of one for him, even though he passed away many years ago. It was such a dark force on him. The role of Roy Cohn, the most notorious lawyer in recent memory, for his role on the McCarthy hearings in Washington and other places, teaching Donald all of the tricks of the trade, the fight back, the attack your opponents, never apologize, all of the things you see on full display. There's also the positive view that he received from the Reverend in New York, who did the power of positive thinking, right? So Trump brings all of this baggage with him into every situation, and what's happening lately is I think he's losing control. It happened a little bit at the beginning of the White House. It started to get really bad, and by the time he's finally out of the impeachment situation, he's holding up that Washington Post saying, acquitted. He thinks finally he's got control of his presidency and of his situation, but it takes no time at all for the forces to gather against him again, and things he can't control, like coronavirus, finally comes forward, and all the things in his life playbook that he's used to doing, to getting through the primaries, to becoming president of the United States, to encouraging his base, to being who, we watch and there's a sort of sense of humor he brings to build the wall. That sense of humor is gone now. And when the virus hits and he can't think positively about it, 205,000 people have died. It's all on him in lots of ways, certainly in the press and to the Democrats and to Biden. And I don't think he can get out from under it. And it's like he's in a pressure cooker. I'm watching somebody whose life I've chronicled over 14 hours since he was elected on Frontline, and now this film. And it feels to me like it's on him and he can't control it. And I think the equipment his life has provided for him to react to all of that is fraying a little bit, and we saw that manifest on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. It's the first thing in his life that he can't sort of confidence game his way out of. Where can people check out the film, Michael?
It streams on pbs.org. It'll rerun on PBS a couple of times in October as well. And YouTube is another good place to see it. You can watch the whole film and all of the interviews in their entirety. It's called the Transparency Project. We put everything up, all 50 interviews in their entirety. So you can watch them and decide whether I treated things fairly inappropriately or not.
And they will, I'm sure. Will. Make that judgment, yeah. Michael. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll have more Rising for you after this.